Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Yes, I'm talking to you, you crazy so-and-so. Where have you been? Why are you back? Where have I been? Why am I back? Well, I've been basically taking a lot of my creative energy and putting it towards a little bit of a side project, if you will. It is basically like a little advertising, promotional business, bit of a side hustle, if you might. And, you know, it's going well. But if you're looking to digitize those dreams of yours, go ahead and hit the link in the description. Get at me through the PMs on Facebook. That's the best way to get a hold of me. And let's light that fire. Let's just get in there. Speaking of jumping in and lighting that fire, let's jump in with all 6 feet. Today I'd like to try to set the very twisted and morbid story of Blanche Monnier as straight as I can. You see, the story that has infected the interwebs is full of lies, or at least half-truths. So this morning I figured we could, cozy up together, grab a bit of the Joe, and engage in a more accurate retelling of what some would consider a gothic and very morbid fairy tale. But is that all it is, or is there some sordid truth to this whole ordeal? Let's begin with the Google infection that we've all scratched at from time to time and spread the disease of. And then after we scratch at that one last time, we'll get into the things that I have discovered. On May 23rd, 1901, an anonymous letter was sent to the Attorney General of France at the time. The letter reads, "Monsieur Attorney General, I have the honor to inform you of an exceptionally serious occurrence. I speak of a spinster who is locked up in Madame Monnier's house, half-starved and living on a putrid litter for the past 25 years. In a word, in her own filth." Well, that's actually 4 words, but that's neither here nor is it also there. Moving along. So the police were alerted. They suited up, went to the Monnier residence, knocked on the door. Louise answered, and they said, "Madame Monnier, where is your daughter?" Louise said, I don't know what you're talking about, daughter. She's been gone for 25 years. I don't know whatever do you mean?" And then the police were like, "Well, actually, we're going to need to go ahead and confirm that. So let us inside. We will do a quick sweep of the residence and just make sure she's not hiding anywhere in here, okay?" Madame Monnier said, "Well, if you must." So they went in. They searched everywhere. They searched under the couches, under the rugs, in the cupboards. Every room was swept. No Blanche. So police officers said, "Well, thank you, ma'am. I do appreciate your time. That'll be all." And as they were leaving, story goes that one of the police officers turned around and was bidding Louise farewell when he noticed a small door just atop some stairs that led off to the left as soon as you went inside. And up there, he saw a, like I say, small attic door that was locked. Police officer said, "We're going to need to go ahead and also take a look in there." To which Louise said, "Oh no, you don't need to look in there. You guys, you're tired. You've been looking all over the place. Obviously, she's not here. That's just a place where we store stuff. You don't need to go in there." And the police officer said, "No, we're gonna go ahead and go in there and check that." Lo and behold, they go up, knock the lock off, open the door, and they're hit with this horrendous stench. It was said that some of the police officers immediately became ill. Some of them were vomiting, and the bravest of the men went inside this very dark room to which all the windows were boarded up. They knocked some of the boards off the windows, let enough sunlight in to a horrifying scene. There, lying on a bed made of straw, covered in her own filth, old food, bugs, you name it, was Blanche Monnier. She was nearly starved to death. She weighed about 55 pounds when they found her. So upon finding Blanche, the story goes that her brother Marcel and her mother Louise were arrested. There was a trial set, but before the trial could even take place, townsfolk had basically mobbed up and said, "We'll not be having it," and then went to the Monnier residence to basically deal some raw street justice to Louise. And as they approached the Monnier residence, Louise became so overwhelmed with fear that she died immediately right there of a heart attack. By then, the truth had come out as to what had been taking place at the Monnier residence. You see, Louise had told everyone in town that her daughter left home and basically just disappeared 25 years earlier. 25 years earlier, Blanche had fallen in love with a commoner, still to this day nameless lawyer who was beneath the Monniers financially and socially, and her mother forbade it, said, "Oh, no, you shan't. I will not allow that." Blanche wasn't having it, said, "Mama, I'm going to do what I want. I'm in love with this man, and I will have his hand in marriage." And Louise said, "Nay, I'm going to take you into this room and lock you in there, and until you decide that you're over it and you're not going to marry this man, I'm not going to let you out." And so Blanche never gave up on her love and was forced to stay imprisoned for 25 years. But is that exactly what happened? Let's have a look at what I've discovered as of late. So let's get into whether or not this is even a true story or not. Spoiler alert, it's a true story. Some of the things that are in the story aren't exactly true. Blanche Monnier did exist. She was found at the Monnier residence after the police were alerted by an anonymous letter. When they got there, she was not in an attic. She was there plain as day in her room. The room was not locked. She was emaciated, very skinny, naked, and covered in filth. Once she was discovered, both her mother, Louise, and her brother, Marcel, were arrested. There was a trial. Louise did die before the trial of a heart attack, but she had actually been hospitalized within a few days of Blanche being discovered. So there was no mob. She didn't just keel over from a heart attack. She had been battling illness for quite some time. When Blanche was discovered, she was immediately taken to the hospital. She was 55 pounds. She appeared to be near death, but was actually quite healthy other than the fact that she had clearly been starving for quite some time. So her health wasn't horrible at the time, but now her mental health was a completely different story. Blanche's story was major news, headlines across France, and the public was absolutely outraged because this was the story that I just told you was the story that everybody had been told. The story of Blanche, a beautiful young 25-year-old woman who had fallen in love, and the love was forbidden, and she was imprisoned. That was the story everybody had been told. Now, when you do scratch that Google infection, you will find pictures of Blanche Monnier, a young, beautiful, vibrant woman. But unfortunately, those pictures aren't Blanche. The woman on the left is Maud Feely, well-known actress at the time, while the woman on the right is an unknown woman, but the picture was taken in 1914, which is a year after Blanche died. The evil that was perpetuated against Blanche Monnier was one much more banal. So let's look into Blanche's mother, Louise. Louise was born in Poitiers in 1825, and she was the daughter of a stockbroker. At the age of 22, she married Charles Emile Monnier, who was an academic that would go on to become the dean of the University of Poitiers. They had two children, a son, Marcel, of course, who was born in 1848, and then shortly after, they had Blanche. By all accounts, Louise Monnier was a very difficult person to live with. She had very poor hygiene, a terrible attitude, and was just a miserable person to be around. If she could take a poop on it, she would. During the trial of her brother Marcel, a maid actually stated that Louise wore the same dirty dress every single day. She complained that her children ate too much and ordered that they be served bread intended for the dogs. And to be clear, the Monniers were very well to do. They were very well off. They had quite a bit of cashisha. They owned a large estate in Poitiers as well as a very nice home in the countryside and several other properties. And at the time of her death, Madame Monnier had over 300,000 francs in her bank account, which is nothing to shake a stick at. Nothing to shake a stick at all. Madame Monnier domineered both her husband and son, but with Blanche it was different. Blanche was very defiant. She constantly butted heads with her mother and would just throw rage-filled tantrums constantly. And the arguments increased the older Blanche got. Let's get into more about Blanche then, shall we? Blanche Monnier, by all accounts, had a very happy childhood, in spite of whatever difficulties arose from the family dynamics, which are pretty dynamic, and we'll come to dig right into that. You bet your ass. As Blanche grew older, she became interested in religion, Christianity specifically, and was just a little bit more, and by a little bit more, I mean quite a bit more than interest. She at one point was studying the Christian Union and had thought considerably about becoming a nun. It was during this time that Blanche claimed to begin having mystical experiences that led to her craving solitude more and more. And because of this, she spent a lot more time in her bedroom. She refused to eat, probably started as a religious fast, but then escalated into full-blown anorexia. 2 years before her disappearance, Blanche became very ill. In 1872, Blanche was 23 years old and she had become very ill with a fever, most likely due to just depriving herself of food and any kind of nutrition. You know, sitting in a room and not getting any kind of sunlight, leading any kind of normal life that would lead to one being a healthy human being. And though the illness did pass, Blanche never really returned to the world after this. At this point in her life, it was clear to everyone that Blanche was suffering from some sort of mental illness. She refused to wear clothes in the house. She refused to wear clothes and would often stand naked in her window, the window that faced the street. And it was thought because of this, Mommy and Daddy boarded up the windows so that nobody caught a charge for Blanche standing naked, trying to get people's attention. Blanche continued to have these mystical visions that, looking back on it, could be attributed to schizophrenia, which was what she was eventually diagnosed with. But what about her brother, Marcel? Why didn't he do anything to help his sister? Or did he? You see, outwardly, at least, Marcel was a very respectable and responsible member of society. He studied law at the University of Poitiers, eventually getting his doctorate. He then worked in local government and married a Spanish woman. He was married to a Spanish woman of noble birth, and they had a daughter, Marie Dolores, who was actually engaged at the time of her father's arrest. And sadly, the scandal resulted in her fiancé breaking it off. Said, "I'll not have the scandal, woman. Kick those rocks. Get on out of here." As I may have stated earlier, Marcel didn't live in the same house as Louise, her husband, and Blanche. He lived right across the street in another property that they owned with, his wife and daughter. Now, during the trial, certain aspects of Marcel's character came to light. If you're eating, you should stop eating because this is going to get in there. Okay, it's going to turn your guts, churn them up a little bit. While Marcel had testaments to his education and high standing, others reported him as being very weak-willed and indecisive, naive, and stupid. During the trial, it came to light that his inability to stand up to his mother was evident to everyone. This is according to his testimony and the testimony of others. But most bizarre of all is that he was reported to be a coprophiliac. Know what that means? That means he liked poopy. His former housemaid went on record and stated that he didn't like using the toilet. He preferred using a bedpan, and that one day he decided to take that bedpan full of his own feces into the living room where his wife and daughter were, and closed all the doors and blinds so they could, quote, better appreciate the smell. Presumably, this testimony was actually considered relevant because it shows his relationship and appreciation of feces, which Blanche was found covered in, and which, it turns out, Blanche was also a coprophiliac. which means she liked the poopy too. Others did testify that Marcel visited his sister regularly and read to her from books and magazines and was very attentive to his sister. He cared a great deal for her. But this also highlights just how neglectful he was of her well-being and her health, and how just absolutely spineless he was to stand up to his mother, put his foot down and say, hey, we've got to take better care of Blanche. Marcel's trial for complicity against violence was held on the 7th of October, 1901, and lasted 5 days. A great many people that worked for the Monniers testified during this trial. That's what I was saying about them. A lot of this is on record. These people came forward and gave their firsthand accounts of what actually happened in that house. They were asked about Blanche's condition, about her room, about just everything that went on in the house. From their testimonies, a different picture emerged. For instance, everybody knew of Blanche. Her presence wasn't a secret. Everyone who worked for the Monniers knew about Blanche and knew that she was mentally and physically ill. And secondly, there was no confinement. She was able to visit other parts of the house whenever she wanted to. And most people testified that for 20 years, the 20 years that Marie Fazy took care of Blanche, she was cleaned, bathed regularly. Her room was kept as clean as Marie could keep it, given Blanche's mental illness. You have to understand that Blanche was a very sick woman who would regularly soil herself, throw feces across the room. You couldn't keep clean linen on her bed. You couldn't keep clean clothes on her. As soon as you put them on her, she would find a way to ruin them in one way or another. But Marie Fazy stayed very diligent in changing her clothes, changing her bed linens, and Marie even slept in the same room with Blanche. It was just expected that she do that, and she kept it as clean as she possibly could, trying to keep up with Blanche's insanity. Blanche wasn't just a difficult person to keep clean. She was also prone to violent rages and broke a lot of furniture in the house. We know this because during the trial, a repairman came forward and testified that he was repeatedly called to the house to fix things, especially things in Blanche's room. Several times he had to repair Blanche's door, her bed. She was breaking a lot of stuff constantly and just throwing these crazy tantrums. So Blanche was not, to say the least, an easy patient to care for. And eventually Marie Fazy died. Her passing was 5 years before Blanche's discovery. And upon Marie Fazy's death, things took a drastic turn for the worse. You see, the problem was Louise just had basically washed her hands of Blanche a long time ago. Before before all of this happened, Blanche being discovered, Louise's husband, Blanche's father, died 14 years previously. And with him basically died any hope of Blanche getting any care beyond what Marie Fazy was willing and able to give her. So when Marie died, she was left to Louise's care. And to say the least, Louise didn't care. Instead of replacing Marie with someone who was of that caliber, Louise just hired a lot of young maids that were not properly trained, were not prepared to take on a patient like Blanche. One maid testified that when she attempted to ask Louise for clean clothes and linens for Blanche's bed, Louise basically said no, because it isn't going to do any good. She's just going to rip them up again and soil them again, so, really, what's the point? Now, during this time, Marcel, remember, he's the one on trial here because Louise, died like days after Blanche was discovered. He, during this time, was still visiting her regularly, reading to her, visiting with her. And when he was asked if her room was kept clean, his statements were a bit contradictory. He claimed that it was kept in an acceptable state, but that he had requested time and time again that her mother remove Blanche and place her in a hospital, something that Louise denied each and every time. Marcel claimed that he did not have the will nor the legal standing to intervene on Blanche's behalf, that he was in effect waiting on Louise to die so that he could take care of Blanche and take her and put her in a hospital. And as Louise's health did decline, this would turn out to be the catalyst to Blanche's discovery. 6 weeks before the anonymous letter was read, Louise had become so ill she could no longer give orders to her staff. And even though she had become so weak that she couldn't even give orders, Marcel still couldn't man up and step in and intervene. So Blanche was left lying in her filth, in the pitiful state that she was found in, for at least 6 weeks, but for most likely far longer than that. And though it is still pretty uncertain as to who sent that letter, it was probably something like a maid told her soldier boyfriend about, the pitiful state that Blanche was in, and the soldier said, that's, all you assholes, this isn't going to fly. I'm going to send a letter, even if it's an anonymous letter, someone's got to take care of this poor woman. So, after it was all said and done, Marcel was found guilty, and he was sentenced to 15 whole months in prison. But his lawyers immediately appealed this, stating that it wasn't Marcel's responsibility to take care of Blanche, it was his mother, Louise. And that Marcel, by law, was not responsible, and so therefore could not be held accountable. You see, there was no good Samaritan law at that time in France. The appeal was successful, and Marcel was free. So, after the trial, Marcel really couldn't show his face around Poitiers, so he sold all the properties and he moved away and made himself very scarce. Unfortunately, Blanche was hospitalized. She was taken good care of, but she constantly made remarks about wanting to go back to her room. And she couldn't understand why she couldn't be allowed to go back. And unfortunately, she died within just a few years of being discovered. And the crazy thing is both Blanche and Marcel died at the same time. They both died in 1913. In 1930, André Gide would write Les Secrets de Poitiers. And this is where a lot of people give the story, the wrong story, or at least the inaccurate story. It is a story of a young woman who's held captive by her mother because of a love affair that her mother didn't approve of. And what I find interesting about the book is there is a picture of a young woman on the front of the book. I don't speak French, and I have not been able to confirm if it is Blanche, but this is the picture here. Not sure what good that does you. If anybody knows or anybody has actually found a real picture of Blanche, please do put it in the comments, or a link to it in the comments. I'd love to see it, just to sate the curiosity I have to what this poor woman looked like when she was young, because the only pictures that have been confirmed of her are the horrifying pictures that were taken when she was discovered. So, I mean, that's gonna wrap it up. That's a more accurate telling of what happened. What happened to Blanche was tragic. It was evil. But I feel that the evil lies in everyone who knew about Blanche and Blanche's situation. The fact that they turned a blind eye to it. There wasn't a letter that was sent much sooner. There wasn't any way to help this woman until it was too late because nobody spoke up. And I think the scariest thing about this whole ordeal is that everyone who's watching this has to admit to themselves that could have been you. How often do things happen right next door to us or right down the street from us or in families that we know about that we just kind of mind our own business? I've done a couple podcasts with a friend of mine, Paul. What's up, Paul? Paul Dalton. One of them was on the Turpin family and how that scenario got way out of control. And people had to have known about it, especially family members. And nobody did anything until it was just basically too late. The kids were just tormented for years. And finally, one of them had to escape with a cell phone that was completely out of commission, call 911 on it, and get help themselves. This happened right in a bustling community, right with neighbors on each side, with people right across the street. Nobody did anything. So I guess what I'm going to leave you with today is take care of your fellow man. You know, if take care of not only yourself and your family, but if you know that there's something messed up going on around you, speak up sooner rather than later. You know, you just might help someone when they need it the most. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope to be doing a lot more of these videos. As I said, the last month's been crazy, but I'm back, and I'm hoping to put out at least, I'm not going to make up numbers, but more. So you stay tuned, my little odd squad. That's Dr. Evil. That's weird. Maybe I'm just going to stare and then